So with this, we come to the end of this unit. Let's take a quick recap as to what we've studied under the fourth unit on the Indian Contract Act 1872, which is the performance of contract. Under this, we first studied who can perform the contract. We said the promisor himself can perform the contract, the legal representative or the legal heir can perform the contract if the promisor has died. Third, the agent of the promisor can perform the contract. Fourth, any other person, maybe friend, relative, or even a stranger to the promisor can also perform the contract. And finally, we said joint promisors can perform the contract. Any of the joint promisors. Joint promisors are the persons who have undertaken the liability together. So their liability is joint and several. So they can individually also perform the contract, and they can also perform the contract along with other joint promisors. Then we came to the topic how the contract needs to be performed. We studied what is actual performance. We said when the contract is actually performed, when the promise is honored, it is actual performance. Then we studied attempted performance. We said this is tender of performance. That is when you offer the performance and the promisee declines it, refuses it, rejects it. So it is good enough a performance. Then we studied how a contract gets discharged. Then we studied mutual agreement. What happens in a contract if two people mutually agree to alter it, two people mutually agree to renew it, two people mutually agree to remit some part of the contract, waive some part of the right, or the parties to the contract mutually agree to merge a smaller contract into a larger contract, or cancel the whole contract altogether. What happens in all these cases we did. Then we studied the impossibility of performance. We said there are two kinds of impossibilities. Impossibility existing at the time of the contract. In this case, the contract becomes void ab initio. The second was supervening impossibility, which occurs after the making of contract. Then we studied lapse of time. What happens when the time expires, the time which was stipulated expires. Then we studied the operation of law. What happens when the promisor dies, or he goes mad, or he becomes insolvent? How does law operate under those cases? Then we studied the time and place of performance as to how is time and place important regarding the performance. And finally, we covered some incidental topics as to how the contract needs to be performed. Now, there are some topics which remain to be covered under this. They are what happens when the contract is not performed, and what is breach, what is anticipated breach, what is actual damages, and what are the remedies available. All these topics we are going to cover in our next session on the Indian Contract Act 1872, which is also the fifth unit of the Act in our syllabus, which is the breach of contract. So for this, we stop here. I hope you do this unit thoroughly because it's a big unit, and in terms of marks, maximum marks in the exam come from this unit. So, all the best.